I'm a little shocked. I've been looking for this proof for 12 years. This is proof of what I've been telling you being known. That's been my big conundrum here. How can I prove to you that what I'm doing is something that was known prior to me? And I didn't know that there was any proof prior to me. It was speculated about by a guy named Robert Loth. You can look that up, Lowth, in Google, since 1752. But in front of you is the first printed English book in the United States. It was printed in 1640. And you know how I found that? By using the Matthew 24 text that I've been showing you on screen here, that for some reason isn't going to show up when I click on the link. I'm just getting a busy signal. So let me stop this video and I'll get it up and then I'll start the video again. Okay, now I hopefully can display both the texts at the same time. See below here it says Psalm 1 from the same version, meaning the first book that was printed in the United States was a book of Psalms. In America it's sometimes called the Bay book, or the Psalm Bay book, or something like that. You're going to have a link to this actual page in the video description. And it's showing part of that book, because the actual book, of course, was actually just bought for $14 million in 2013. So we only can see a facsimile of extracts. And this particular extract was published in the early 1900s, and you'll be able to download it. But I just want you to see, these are the English words, and this is the published year. How did I find this? I found it through this text, right here. See Ho Kurios there? That is equivalent to 1640. And every other occurrence of Ho Kurios in this text is referring to a Bible text that someone was publishing. Like here, and specifically to the Reformers. And here, every single occurrence of Ho Kurios from verse 42, where it starts, the first time Ho Kurios is listed in the passage of Matthew 24. Every single time you see this, the distance between it and the next Ho Kurios in syllable counts is divisible by 7. And each one of these references refers to a reformer. This is Jan Hus using Wycliffe. This is Zwingli and Erasmus and Luther. This is John Knox. Oh, and this is our text in front of you. First Bible text printed in the United States. Now, why does that matter? Well, first of all, because I found it by looking at 1640 and I didn't know what 1640 was. See, 1607 means 1637. Exe means present, Christ being present, and here's Ho Kurios, 3 syllables, not 4. So it's covering 1610 in the syllable counts to 1612, which is 1640 to 1642. And what's important about 1640? Oh, that's the first time in America that somebody metered the Hebrew, which is unknown to others at that time. The actual style that the Bible uses from Genesis to Revelation to meter its text. But they figured that since the psalm is sung, it must be metered. So what did they do? They went back to the Hebrew and they counted every syllable, and then they tried to make the English words have the same syllable counts. That's what I'm doing here. That's what I've been doing for the last 8 years. Now, this is a smoking gun. This is proof that what I'm telling you was something that people knew about, at least with respect to the Psalms, and they tried to translate using the same syllable counts. Now, I don't get the exact same syllable counts they do here in verse 1, but I know how they got these syllable counts, because I have the same Hebrew they had. They're counting syllables that I would not count. So they're coming up with a total of 28 syllables here. Notice it's divisible by 7. I came up with 21. Now either they're right in their syllable count or I'm right in mine. But the point is both of them are divisible by 7. The first 7ing, this is something they didn't know, is a date line. David is telling you when he wrote this text by means of the 7ing. So now we have to look at, well, what's 28? It's 28 prior to when he writes, and 28 years after he writes are two significant dates. When you figure those out, you know how old David was. He could have been age 28 when he writes it. And he's dating from his own birth because of his future 28 years after he writes. Okay? Now, I'd have to go look up in Bible all the events in David's life to know why 28 is important, both before, if it's his birth date, and after, because he'd then be 56. And 56 is one of the most important meter numbers in the Bible. Like Paul uses it, Mary uses it, Psalm 90 uses it, Genesis 1 uses it, Daniel uses it. Well, he uses it kind of funky. He adds to show that you're late. But the point is that our boy here, okay, is using it right here. See? Hokurias. It's 1610, which means 1640, which is how I learned to go look up. I started searching, well, what about if the Bible was important in 1640? And what Bibles were published? And then I ran across this thing, which is a list of Bible and parts thereof published from 1505 to 1820. And as you can see, you can download it for free and read it yourself and search it yourself. And if you use Adobe Acrobat's OCR function, you can search it in the PDF. The PDF that you get from Google will not automatically be searchable. You have to use the OCR function in Adobe Acrobat, the full version of Acrobat, not just the reader. And if you use the OCR function, you make the text searchable. It's no longer a graphic. This is a graphic. Okay? But you can search it here. That's what I did. See, page 371 was the first sample from the 1640 edition. He calls it the New England version of the Psalms. It's got other names. Usually called the Bay Psalm Book, and it was purchased. You can search on it in Bay Psalm Book. Let's see. How about I kill this, and I make a new window, and I go through my history, and where is it? Bay Psalm. Ooh. Show all history. There it is. Bay Psalm Book in Wikipedia. You can just look this up in Wikipedia. Extant copies, they call it the Bay Psalm Book. That's one of its names. But in this catalog, not that one, Not that one. Right here. It's just called the Psalms New England Version. First edition. Cambridge. That's U.S. Massachusetts. 1640. Okay, and that fourth, I think that's telling you what kind of version it was. Okay, was that 4 octavo or something? This is Psalm 19. I counted this. They're using 12 syllables here, and I counted 12 syllables too. In Psalm 19, verse 1. 12 syllables in the Hebrew, it's 12 syllables in the English. This one is 14 syllables. So that would tell you the date of Psalm 19. If 14 syllables is right. I got 12 syllables the second time. So one of us is right. But the point is, they were counting the Hebrew syllables and then making English words to match the same syllable counts. Even if it ended up being a little awkward. You getting the point? So what I'm saying to you, okay, here, was not unknown. It just got discarded. They didn't figure out, well, wait a minute. If the Psalms are counting syllables, then why don't we count syllables for the rest of the Bible? And they didn't notice because they didn't count enough or weren't looking for it. Oh, wait a minute, this is 14. Yeah, and the next page, what do you have? Psalm 1, 28, 2 sets of 14. And nobody noticed how odd that is? How come it keeps coming back to sevens? Yeah, because it's a deliberate style in the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. But if it fell into disuse, there was a brief fad, and John Knox apparently knew about it too, because, where is it? Not here. Not here. Here. See? Knox's liturgy. Well, liturgy means that you're gonna have a cadence. He made his own translation of the Psalms of David. How much, I don't know. But see, it says in prose and in meter, spelled in the old, Dutch style, with their whole usual tunes, newly corrected and amended. I can't get a copy of Knox's liturgy. It was published in 1615, but Knox died in 1572 or something like that. So, I would really like to know what kind of meter he used. Was he turning it into a Scotch rhyme? Or was he too, like this guy, counting the syllables in Hebrew and coming up with syllables in English or Scotch to match? I don't know. But the point is that doing it in meter, if you were to search this book or this book, which is this book, the same book here, if you were to search on the word meters, M-E-T-E-R or M-E-E-T-E-R or M-E-T-E-R, you will find out that there was something of a fad in the 15 and 1600s for doing this. So here is my objective. The distance between each of these hokurias is 7 syllables. And I made posts on them in Frank Forum, which is right here. Here's a post. And a link to this will be in the video description. About the hokurias being divisible by 7 every time it occurs. From the last one. So here's verse 45. Here's verse 42. The first time it occurs. You count the syllables from there to there, and sometimes you have to count it from here to here, or from here to here, or from here to here. It's sevens. It's the same style that Paul uses in Ephesians, the sevening. It's the same style that you find used for these other things that we did on the Amen Lego Humin, which I haven't fully explained. There's also another clause that starts in Matthew 24, 27. Here we go. See this? Parousia tu huio tu anthropo. That's also the distance every time. And unfortunately, we already sevened it, but we didn't know that it was on purpose. We didn't know it was based on this clause. Every time this clause occurs, or one of its keywords like huio or parousia, it sevens. Every time. Are you beginning to understand that there's something going on here on purpose with the syllable counts? I hope so. And I hope you also get out of it that, you know what? They actually knew about this. They actually knew. John Knox knew something about the meter. Whether it's the same thing as what I'm saying, I don't know. But honey, you got proof right here. Psalm 1. 14 syllables here, 14 syllables in the second clause. That's a total of 28. And of course, the 14 is already divisible by 7. So when Psalm 1 was written, in verse 1, if their syllable counts are right versus mine, then the first 14 is a date line, and then the sum of the two is a second date line. So David is writing 14 years from X and 28 years from Y. And all we have to do is figure out what those are. And I have a suspicion I know, but I first want to compare my syllable counts to theirs, because I'm coming up with 21 as the total here. And they're coming up with 28, so I want to see who's right. But do you see that it's deliberate? This is a 14. In their own count, this is 1640. I didn't write this. This is 14 syllables. You can count them yourself in English, and this is 14 syllables. They did that. I didn't even know it existed until today. So when you see this, and you count the syllables here, and you see that there's a 7 difference between this and the last time Hokurias occurs, prior, see, this is verse 42, when it first occurs, here's the next time, and then you compare that to the year AD when you add 30 to the count, and oh wow, each time it's referring to a reformer who translated the Bible and was using the original languages. And it's about the Reformation. See? And then here's the last time it's used in Matthew 24. And that's referring to this text right here in 1640. Because the meter is part of the interpretation of the text, and it was forgotten. Provably forgotten, because you're looking at a copy, a reprint of that text in the Besan book. See, Besan book. This is the entry in Wikipedia, Besan book. It was first printed in 1640 in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The first book that was printed in North America. And there's a facsimile of its title page. And you come down here, and you'll find a facsimile of Psalm 88. But when you go to this other link, it has more psalms that you can test. So you can count the syllables in English and say, oh wow, there's 7. Yeah, see? Same pattern here in the original Greek as in the Hebrew, which is the same thing as I found already in Genesis, Isaiah 53, Daniel 9, and Anoninominom found it in Zechariah. He's also looking at Malachi, and of course in the Psalms. So when I'm talking to you about this meter, don't think that it's something I'm inventing. And here's your proof that I didn't invent it, because somebody else noticed it in 1640, and it's the first printed book in the United States. And before that, John Knox knew about it. But I don't know how he counted the syllables, because I can't get a hold of this particular liturgy so I can see, what the text says. You with me on this? You see I'm not making it up? This is the best Christmas present I've ever had. Well, maybe not the best, but very close to it. God caused me to understand how this meter that I'm telling you about works. He caused me to find it in 2008. He caused me to find out how it works at Christmas of 2010. And now I'm finding proof that somebody else knew about it, which is what I've been looking for. ever since 2004. And it's staring you in the face. So this is based on something that people have known since John Knox. So why aren't we using it? Well, maybe now people are going to start. Because it's not just Brain Out talking about it anymore, is it? Peace out. Oh, this is a happy Christmas. Happy Christmas. Okay, continuing on. This is the most famous guy contending that there's meter in the prophecies. His name is Robert Loth. This particular translation of his own is published after his death in 1832, so the first publishing of it I don't know when. But Loth was made famous, or made himself famous, or became famous, when in 1752 he started to argue that the prophecies are metered, which of course they are. That's what I've been showing for the last 8 years. But he encountered a lot of heat in making that claim. This is one of his books trying to argue that there's meter in the prophecies, and in front of your face is something that I've already done a lot of work on, and this was how I discovered the meter, was Isaiah 53, which in Hebrew starts in Isaiah 52:13. So that's the text that you see on screen. This book, which you can get, is part of the 250 Rare Bibles CD from the old CD bookshop at gmail.com. It's also on eBay. The old CD bookshop is also on eBay. That's where I got it. And you can get it too as part of the 250 Rare Bibles. It's in disc 2, not disc 1. And Loth did a lot of writing, and this is one of the first parts of what he wrote about Isaiah to Malachi, trying to show, unsuccessfully, trying to show that the prophecy is metered even though it isn't technically considered poetry. His arguments are really dumb. That's one reason why I didn't catch it. But his arguments are dumb because the competition he was facing was saying, oh, but it's not poetry if it's not like Western poetry. Honey, this isn't Western. It's Hebrew. They're not Western. Everything Western came from the Hebrew. Okay? The Greeks learned a lot about what they did from the Hebrews. That doesn't mean they're going to have exactly the same poetical styles. So you'll notice that here I'm on page 103. He spends the first, 50 to 100 pages trying to say, well, you see, because they use flowery languages and flowery words in the Hebrew, and they use flowery words in poetry, therefore it's poetic, therefore you should count it as being poetry. Except that dear Dr. Robert Loth here himself is not counting the syllables in Hebrew. Well, he starts out that way. Behold, my servant shall prosper. Behold, my servant shall prosper. That's 8 syllables. That's also how many syllables it is in the Hebrew. Hine, yaskil avdi yarum. See? Hine, yaskil avdi yarum. 8 syllables in the Hebrew. Okay, but the second clause in the Hebrew is also 8 syllables. Wa nisa wa gavach me'od. See? 8 syllables. That's in Isaiah 52:13, which is where the chapter 53 really starts, in the Hebrew. Okay, so what happened to Loth here? He's using 16 syllables, not 8. Why'd he double it? He shall be raised aloft and magnified and very highly exalted. Now, you don't need that many words in English to translate the 8 words in Hebrew. Okay? Wa nisa, and he's raised. Wa gavach, and he's glorified. Me'od, vehemently. Or, well, vehemently is too many syllables. Nisa, and he's raised. 3 syllables each. Gavech, and he's glorified. Well, okay, that's 4 syllables in English. He's glorified. That'd be 3. Okay? Ma'od, it means greatly, really means vehemently. Okay, so just say greatly. And now you have 8 syllables in the English, just like you do in the Hebrew. What's with all of this? See, he's caving into his accusers. He's not following the syllable counts now. Isaiah 53 is perfectly metered in paragraphs, so perfect that Matthew uses those same paragraphs to do his genealogy, and so does Luke. Did anybody bother to count the syllables to see where that stuff came from? Where did Matthew get his 44? From Isaiah 53, 13 and 14. Where did Luke get his 77 sons? From the sum of the syllable counts in Isaiah 52, 13, 14, and 15. And 15 is about the Gentiles. That's why Luke is adding in verse 15 to craft 77, because verse 15 is 35 syllables long. Exactly the same as Isaiah 53:10. Every single paragraph, metered to 7, has an exact mate in Isaiah. All of the paragraphs are 7'd and paired. What happened to Robert Hull? He got the syllable count right here. So why did he double it here? Why did he just keep going? This is why the scholars do not know that the prophecies are metered just like the parts they recognize as poetry. You don't understand. Measure, meter, accuracy. Makes it easy to remember if it's in sets of 7. And it's prophetic. And the 42, and Matthew obviously knew that, 42 is double 21, which is how many people that our boy Jacob entered into Egypt with. Not counting the other kids. Because he had 2 wives. 2 times 21, you get the pun. 42. And then their kids, the total ended up being 70, except it would have been and should have been 72, but 2 of the kids died. And of course, that's what Genesis tells you. But that's what 42 means. Generative. And that's why Matthew uses it. And that's why Isaiah is counting 42 syllables between start of verse 13 and start of verse 14. Isaiah is counting 42 syllables. And he gets to 77 here, which is when David died. This whole thing is sort of like talking back to David's lifetime. The promise to David in 2 Samuel 7 sort of being reiterated here. Matthew knew that. Luke knew that. That's why their genealogies are patched to these syllable counts. How come Robert Loth didn't know that, but a brainout does? You see, this is what's killing me. This is why Trump was elected. People aren't doing their homework. But anyway, at least you can go look. This is the one guy that started, the argument, and he doesn't, prove his point, unfortunately. But he's the one who started the argument. Gee, maybe prophecy is metered too. Yeah, duh. What do you think Matthew 24:25 is? In 7s. Very deliberately. Like Isaiah 53. So go look it up, because I've already done the videos on these from 8 years ago. I gotta hang up now. I'm too angry. Okay, so now we're trying to figure out where did the scholars go wrong. Wait a minute, I got a cough again. Excuse me. I'm taking a cough drop now, so my voice is going to sound funny. Okay. Why am I showing this to you? Because this is a book in Google Books that you can search, and you can even download it. I've talked about it before. See, right here. And I'm searching on the English spelling of meter with an R-E ending to find out how many books, because that's the theme of this book. List of editions of Bible and parts thereof in English from 1505 to 1820, because this book is written in 1852. Okay. How common was it to do this? And I'm using variant spellings because there are 3 different spellings of meter in this book. M-E-E-T-E-R, which is a Dutch spelling. M-E-T-E-R, which is American English spelling. And M-E-T-R-E, which is England English spelling. Okay? So, I just searched on the word meter. So here we go. Book of Psalms in meter, close and proper to the Hebrew. By somebody, Matthew Simmons and the Company of Stationers. The Company of Stationers was the name of the place that had the original apparatus for the King James. And in the 1660 fire in London, the apparatus was destroyed. So the original first 1611, as it were, master copy is no longer available. Okay? Now I could search on that page, but you can do it too. Because I just want to show you that there are 80 results here, so I'm not going to go through all of them. Okay, here's another one by Bishop Horn, and that'll be 1823. This one, I guess I should show what year it is. Wait a minute. Okay, see how early this is? That's 1644, so this is 1643. Now that matters, because in Matthew 24, it's predicted. Put 1640, 1642. So let's see if this is 1642, 1643. Okay, so maybe it was physically published in 1643, but they were working on it in 1642. See, here's 1642. And I haven't searched in all the spellings of meter yet either. Okay. Here's 1641. And here's the one I showed you at the beginning. 1640. There we go. This one. Here's one by Bryson, and that's in Edinburgh. Okay, this is the one I did the video on in New England. See, they don't call it the Bay Book of Psalms here. Okay, they just call it the Book of Psalms. And they just say New England by Stephen Day, D-A-Y-E. Sometimes his name is spelled without the ending E. And that's at the Bodleian Library. Okay, their copy of it, but there's actually 11 different copies, and one of them, a guy named David just bought it in 2013 for $14 million. And it's the Library of Congress. It's out on loan to the Library of Congress. That was when I first started doing the videos. I was using this book to find them. Okay? Because the meter in Matthew 24 is focusing on 1640 to 1642. That's the whole Kurios reference, remember? So now we're going through 1640, and instead of 1642, okay, maybe the word tunes means meter also. Maybe some of these are also meter, but they don't use the word meter, so I can't find them. But that's 1641. Because whole Kurios is 3 syllables, not 4. Okay? Now maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is 4, in which case 1643 is in view. There you go. So here's another one. RC for the company. And that was done from St. Paul's in London. Okay? Here's another one, Psalms of David, 4 languages, 4 parts. That might be metered, I don't know, it doesn't say. Here's another one in meter by Francis Runs. Are you getting the impression? Are you beginning to understand that this was popular? Look at all these translations coming out in meter within the same 3 years. Okay? Sorry about the sound of my mouse. It's a very noisy mouse. Okay? There you go. So you see why it's metered in Matthew? I mean, yeah, in Matthew 24, verse 50. Where you see Hokorias. Here you go. Again. So for all of those years, or at least 1640 and 1643, you have multiple different persons publishing the Psalms in meter. See, this is Francis Rue. This guy up here is Sternholtz, London. So it's a different publisher and it's a different writer. So people wanted this. It was popular in 1640 through 42, 43. Okay, here it is again, 1644. See? Now, are they counting the Hebrew syllables to get their meter? Well, I don't know. I'd have to find those books. I don't have them. But you see, the idea is popular. And if the one in 1640 counted the syllables in Hebrew in America, where do you think they got that idea from? Okay, because America was just getting started. So they got it from these other guys, and it was popular in England. Alright? What else can you call it? So let's go back. That's 1640, 42, 43, 44. Alright? This one is 1824, so this is 1823. Okay, I guess we should look at it. There's 1823. Oh my goodness. 1824 and 1823. It kept on being popular even 200 years later. Okay? Look at this. Songs of Solomon. That's the way they spelled it then. Psalms, they kept on being popular. Here's a literal translation based solely on the authority of Reverend Joseph Parkhurst, but I don't know if that's metered. He's not saying it is. You get the point? Every single year they're coming up with this stuff, and I can't read the handwriting there. Because this is a facsimile copy of a book. Maybe you can read that. You can use this thing here up at the top, the 4 arrows, or you can use the magnifier glasses to read it. I don't have time to do that right now. See, look again, 1828, and in meter. 1829, new metrical version. Okay, and I haven't even searched all this. Metrical is another word you can search on in here. This is just searching on the word meter spelled with English spelling. And I got 80 results to go through. Okay? Look at this. Here's 1691. In other words, once it started in 1640, it kept on going, baby. Okay, now is it only Psalms? Well, as we've seen in the other videos, it was also Job and even Revelation by 1892. What I'd like to find out is how many other books besides Psalms did they translate in meter? Okay, was it just Job and Psalms? Or anybody else? And I'm going to turn this off now, but I just want you can, the link will be in the video description. You'll be able to search on it yourself with the variant spellings of meter with 2 E's, meter with an R-E-N-D, meter with an normal American spelling, M-E-T-E-R, metrical. Sometimes they say inverse, in as what preposition, and then verse, translation inverse. Okay? Look them up yourself. Pick the ones you want. And then ask yourself a question, what happened to the scholars? Did they forget about this? And in the next video, I'll show you what happened to the scholar who actually pioneered the idea of looking at the whole Bible in terms of meter, how he got it wrong. Peace out. Okay, now how do I turn this thing off now? Okay, I really have to append this video. This is the earliest one I've found so far of meter. Now I'm searching on the American English spelling. You'll notice that here the year is 1549. Okay, 1549 is a really important year because that's the year that John Knox got freed out of his imprisonment in Scotland and came to England. It's because of that event, which is actually prophesied in the Bible. I've already covered that in the Kurios references in Frank Forum, because I plotted them all. Okay, 1549 is when he came out of jail and went to England because he was exiled from Scotland at that time. And he spent some years in England teaching. And guess what? Because I can't get my hands on his own metered translation, so it's like, well, what can I find? Well, here we go. Look right here. The 7 penitential psalms drawn into English meter, with a metrical prologue before every psalm by Sir Thomas Wyatt. This is what our boy Knox would have discovered when he came to England. There was a translation that preceded him, and of course the Stephanus Greek manuscript will come out in 1550. And that really stirred up a flurry of new translations too. But this is after Wycliffe, which was 1402. Okay, Wycliffe didn't actually translate his own Bible. It was a guy named Hereford. But that spawned a bunch of translations into English, especially after 1533, which this is 16 years after that. Because in 1533, Henry VIII separated England from the papacy in order to get his divorce so he could marry Anne Boleyn. So as a result of that, there was a flurry of new translations coming out in England. This is why Christ focuses so much on England in Matthew 24:25. There's a thing that there's a rhetorical device called anaphora, and the Bible uses that to count the syllables and center on important periods in history. I already did the videos on that showing it with Paul in about 2010, 2011. And now we're starting to do it on the Matthew 25 passage, Matthew 24:25 passage, which Anoninomenon discovered last year. And I wouldn't listen to him when he kept bugging me to look at it until this year. It turns out that him finding it was also prophesied in Matthew 25:11. I only discovered that a few days ago, and I'm still in a state of shock about it. But we're not supposed to care if it's us or somebody else being prophesied, right? You're supposed to just take the information. So here it is, 1549. That was a prophecy of John Knox. It's hitting on that year for him in Matthew 24:25, when he would start to discover and start translating the Bible. Okay? And he was in England. And actually the period of time spans him and Calvin. Because he would end up, as a result of being in England, he'd quit, he'd leave England and go to Geneva to talk to Calvin. All right? Well, there you go. The meter was known then. God was making the meter known to the reformers. And they didn't figure out, as far as I can tell yet. They knew it existed. Because see, here we go. This is the earliest instance I can find of a metered translation. They knew it existed. but they didn't know the doctrinal significance, that the meter, the counts, the syllable counts are doctrinally significant. They're deliberate syllable counts to interact with the text. Now, obviously they suspected that, or they wouldn't bother trying to translate the English with the same number of syllables, but they didn't apparently understand what I'm telling you. Alright? This is really important. Since 1549, God's been getting this information out there. So should you be surprised that maybe He did prophesy anoni nominum, finding it, so that we could revisit what they didn't learn the first time? Okay? Let's not get weirded out by this. Let's just learn whatever the doctrine is. And here's the doctrine. Yes, I want you to do the syllable counts. I've been telling people that since at least 1549. Actually, since before, because the initial audience for the original scripture in Hebrew and Greek, they knew the syllable counts. They used them. Peace out. Okay, well, guess what? Here's another reason why 1640 was predicted by Christ. Here's the Geneva Bible. That's not a big surprise. The Geneva Bible had come out almost a century before. I think it's based on Stephanus from 1550. Okay, look, 1641. This is now no longer Psalms, Song of Solomon. They thought, okay, well, we'll look that's got to be metered. But see, they're thinking in terms of poetry. They're not thinking in terms of meter as measured like in let's count the syllables so we can always verify we have the right memorization. Which in oral, when you're orally memorizing something, that's what you do, is you count the syllables on your hands. That's what I do. Around the shores that round our coast from Deal to Ramsgate span, I found alone on a piece of stone an elderly naval man. His hair was weedy, his beard was long, and weedy and long was he. And I heard this wight on the shore recite in a singular minor key. Oh, I am the cook and the captain bold and the mate of the Nancy brig, a boatswain tight, and I forget the rest. I learned that when I was like 10. I'm 63 now. So you see, meter's important for memorization. They knew that, but they didn't seem to apply it to all the Bible or recognize that it's doctrinally significant to the text being metered. But at least they knew to count the syllables. 1640 is when they started coming out with these metered translations. And God decided that was really important. Do you see why? Here it is, 1641. Here it is again, 1642. This time Song of Solomon, because that's part of the Bible. Okay? And let's see where else it is. Metrical. See, I'm searching now on the word metrical. Alright. What's this one? That's also Psalm. Oh, it's Judah. The Harp of Judah. Or Songs of Zion. That's also Song of Solomon. That's 1837. That's a lot later. I'm looking for the earliest ones. Okay. So let's see. Let's look at this one. Metrical version of the Psalms. Well, we have that already. Somebody's writing in the margin. This is 1560. That's after 1549, though, so. And it's still the Psalms, so I'm not really worried about that one. But see, you can search on the word metrical and you can play with this yourself. Okay, this is Song of Psalms. This is Job. Okay, now let's see how early this Job is, because I already did a video on Job. This is 1610. Now the Job that I showed you is from 1878. But this is 1610. Metrical version of Job. 1610. That was also a prophesied year in Matthew 24. Syllable 1580, syllable 1580. Okay? Or 1580, 1581, really. But 1610, it could have been late in 1610. It could have been considered, if it was after September, it would be considered 1611 in the Bible calendar, which starts at the autumnal equinox, which would be our old year, but their new year. Okay? So here we go. Now, I don't see anything yet there, but in 1610, metrical version of Job. Okay, and the video I did was 1878 metrical version of Job. So the metrical version of Job started being done in 1610. Getting to get the picture? This is happening over and over on different books of the Bible since the Reformation. So what happened? Did all the scholars of the 20th century, their brains just turn off? You guessed. So what happened to the scholars that they didn't do this, that they didn't pay attention? Okay? Why were they so bad? Well, here's our first big clue. Look at this. Same book, okay? Now we're at his preface at page 18. Look at this. Just dripping with self-righteousness. Okay? Right here, see? With respect to the very large number of writers who have occasionally exercised their talents of versification in translating small portions of the Psalter, or even one single psalm, I have felt considerable doubts whether their desultory labors ought to find place in a work like the present. In other words, it's almost beneath his dignity to bother to list. That's what went wrong with the scholars. If it's poetry, it can't be scholarly. Really? Did you ever stop to think that perhaps meter has another purpose besides poetry? And if it's poetry, why does that automatically mean that it's not scholarly? Do you realize how much more intelligence it requires to fit the right words into just a specific number of syllables than just to say it any old way like you verbose bastards of the 19th century were busy doing? I swear I want to strangle them. Let's go on reading right here, right here, right here. But, not to mention that magnificent burst of genuine feeling by Richard Crashaw, see page 376, such names as Bacon, Milton, Donne, Watson, Herbert, and Addison could not be passed over without the appearance of disrespect. See, that's all these guys care about. They who praise themselves by themselves are not wise. See, the Bible doesn't matter to these people. What matters to them is their own opinion of themselves. And oh, poetry is, that's what women do. So we scholars can't pay attention to it. So if the Bible is being versified in translation by somebody who can clearly read the original Hebrew and Greek, so it should be scholarly enough, you jerk-offs. Well, we're not going to pay attention to that because it's poetry. This is why Trump got elected. This same kind of stupid thinking, or actually non-thinking, and pat my back, see how good I am. You know what happens to you when you do that? You lose the ability to discern truth. That's what's so sad about this. For a century and a half, because this is 1852, we could have known what I've been talking about from some Mr. Dr. So-and-so with all these initials after his name. So why didn't he know it, and why does the brain out know it? Because it was beneath him to bother to count the syllables. You get that? Look at this. their desultory labors ought to find place. Considerable doubts whether their desultory labors ought to find a place in a work like the present. In other words, I'm too important to deal with poetry and counting syllables. You jerk off. So 160 years of Bible scholarship we could have had, we don't have, because jerks like this guy think, oh, well, syllable counting is something, that you only do for poetry. Women's work. Yeah, and so a woman found it, huh? Actually, not just a woman. But right now, starting the ball rolling, happens to be a woman, and I honestly don't care about the female thing. I'm a misogynist, if anything. But honey, you want to be antagonistic to the Word of God on the grounds that, oh, it's counting syllables can only be for poetry, and that's not something a smart person would do. Really? And then he mentioned some very smart people. Bacon, who didn't even believe in Christ, really. I mean, sort of did, and then backed off. Milton, he's the guy who wrote Paradise Lost. Donne, I forget what he wrote. Wotan, I forget what he wrote. Herbert and Addison, I forget what they wrote. But they weren't dummies. They could read the Hebrew and the Greek. Milton in particular. I think he was like a defrocked priest or something. Okay? They could not be passed over, duh. And the Bible shouldn't be passed over either just because you count the syllables. Did you ever stop to think that God might have a real important reason for you to count the syllables? Don't you have to count the items off on your hand when you go to the grocery store? Okay, I got 10 items to buy on my list, and you put your list in your purse or something, or it's a little too far away, and you're too lazy to open up your list to see what was on it, so you think, okay, there were 10 things, and you happen to remember 5. So now you know you got 5 more things to remember, and you play a game with yourself, whether you're going to open up the list, or you're going to try to remember the 5 things without looking at the list. We all do that. It's human nature. Okay, but you're missing out on the divine nature by paying too much attention to the appearance of disrespect. So the only reason these poetry things are included is because I don't want to be accused of disrespect, even though I'm disrespecting you by my contemptuous wording here. And their undoubted reputation. See, all they care about is respect and reputation. The Word of God means not a thing. Has paved the way for the admiration, admission of others, perhaps more questionable pretensions. So who's being pretentious? This guy writing this paragraph. I may add that the publication of Mr. Holland's valuable work, the something or other, let's go look, the Psalmist of Britain in 1843, seemed to me to indicate that the public felt an interest. Look, see? This is what I've been saying all along. The public felt an interest in what he contemptuously calls these small and scattered poetical thingies. Where he's now quoting what? The public felt an interest. Yeah, public is interested in Bible, and if the Bible has X syllables, translate those syllables in English so we can see closer to what the original meant. Yeah, they had the public, the uneducated public, had an instinctive remembrance. Oh, the syllable counts are important. Yeah, because their ancestors were 1,000, 2,000 years prior, that's the only way they could get Bible, was by orally memorizing it by syllable counts. So, residing in your DNA, that as it were racial memory of needing to count the syllables of Bible in order to have it proper, that's why the public felt an interest. Oh, but the hoary heads didn't care. Oh, it's poetry. It's not scholarly.
we're going to ignore it. But I'm going to show what a nice person I am. And in order to avoid the appearance of disrespect, I'm going to include these metrical translations. See, here we go. Metrical translations. He is condescending to put the metrical translations I've been showing you. He's been condescending to put them in because, after all, they are metrical translations, and that means that they're intended to reach the public because the public felt an interest. Yeah, the public turns out to be smarter than the writer of this book, who is condescending to include the metrical translations. That tells you why the scholars of the 20th century don't understand the importance of syllable counting in the Bible. Right there. There's your answer. And I'm now going to take you to one of the guys who did contend that it was important, and watch how he screws it up. That comes next. Okay, now you can just shoot me. This is 1748. The very first use of the word numphios, which is actually 2 syllables in the Greek, in Matthew 25, is at the point in the meter where it would be 17, 18, and 19. 1748 and 49, therefore, in AD. And historically, that stands for the War of the Austrian Succession. And all throughout this text, the key words here, numphios being a synonym for kurios, which is a synonym for Son of Man, all of it designed to show the signs of the appearing of the Son of Man. My question to God a couple of days ago was, all right, assuming that Matthew 24:50, which is the 1640, text, assuming that Matthew 24:50 rather, the occurrence of kurios there means some kind of text, some kind of Bible text from 1640 to 1642, then what is it with respect to numphios, which is another synonym showing up in Matthew 25? And that occurrence is at 1719 and 1718 syllable counts, which are 1748 and 1749 AD counts. Now you're looking at it, and I just posted the video, not knowing this. Okay, I was busy looking for something else, and I'm trying to find the earliest meters and what books they metered from 1505 to 1820. And here we go. Look at this. Right here. Job. Now the video I posted showing how Job was metered is actually from 1878. This is a century earlier. Are you beginning to see the importance of this? God wanted the meter known, and it's been serially printed out. But the scholars, that's beneath them. That they consider it poetry. They're not thinking about the wider, more important and obvious meaning of meter, which is high if you're memorizing text orally. You have to have a way to memorize it and check your memorization. And they know that everybody memorized the text orally. It was a command in Scripture in Deuteronomy 6 and Deuteronomy 30. 3 times a year they had to meet in Jerusalem to hear the Bible given. And they were to memorize it and have it on their head day and night. That's what Deuteronomy 6 tells you. To this day, every Jew knows the most important thing is Torah. So what happened to the scholars of the 20th century? Did their brains just turn off, or did their arrogance turn on? 1748. So numphios in Matthew 25 has the same significance, but it also continues that same duality, just like king-priest, Kata Melchizedek for Christ. It's got that same duality. There's going to be a satire on the politics of the period, as well as, hi, I'm going to use these keywords that are really about me to show important dates when my word comes out. And it's important to know the meter, because there's all kinds of stuff about the text you can't understand until you know the meter. Like if you go through the Genesis 1 meter, the videos I did in Vimeo on it, or just Google on Genesis 1 meter PDF at brainout.net, and you look at that, Moses' purpose for Genesis is very different from the way our pulpits explain it. Same text, but Moses' point of departure and his POV on it are very different. He's not explaining the origin of the universe. That's not even the goal. The goal is, why are we, Israel, poised to go into the land, just having come through the Red Sea? Except in Hebrew, it's not called the Red Sea. That was invented by the Greeks because of Pharaoh drowning there. The Jews called it Yam Suf, Reed Sea. And he's explaining why there was a Reed Sea that they went through. And he likens that analogy, coming through dry shod in water, to the initial water, to the flood, to both the initial restoration, not creation, restoration of the world, because Israel's there to restore the earth too, and the flood, which was also there to restore the earth. He's making an analogy to two restorations, the first one pre-man, and the second one, which was Noah. But all of our scholars miss that. Why? Because they don't know the meter. So you think God would kind of make it important. Hi, here it is, 1748. Pay attention. Meter translation. Here, Book of Job again. So it's not like God didn't cause people to do this and pay attention to the syllable counts. It's that the scholars were too big-headed to think, well, gee, maybe there's a larger reason. Duh! Okay, I'm too angry now. I'm sinning. I'm going to go use 1 John 1:9 and do something else for a few minutes. Okay, so it was syllables 17:18 and 17:19 in Matthew 25, which is toward the beginning of it. First occurrence of the word numphios, and that had to be something about Scripture. We just saw 1748. Now here's 1749. Look, look, look. See here? See here? The last words of David, 2 Samuel, chapter 23. Divided according to the meter. I didn't know there was meter in 2 Samuel. Well, now I'll have to go look. That's kind of important, because Isaiah 53 is based on David. And Psalm 1 is based on David. And David's basically telling you, hi, I'm 42 years old when I write this. And I was crowned king when I was 14. I've been, it's 28 years later. And 14 years from now, I'll have 21 years left to live. Likening himself to a tree from which fruit is born. And, the tree doesn't grow its own fruit, so he's not praising himself. He's praising God. Because you know what? A tree does not produce its own fruit. You know what happens? A tree is kind of like hair. It grows out from the tree, and the tree can't do really anything about it. It happens to the tree. The fruit happens to the tree. So when all those stupid Christians are running around saying, oh, you're not fruit-bearing, as if fruit was something you produced, they're the ones who aren't fruit-bearing. They're as sterile as can be. Because if you are fruit-bearing, it's happening to you. Ask any woman who's ever been pregnant. When she's in the middle of giving birth in labor, she turns to her husband and is angry and says, you did this to me. Yeah. You don't take credit for something that happens to you. You don't take any blame for it either. Ding, 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 ding. Last words of David. God thinks that's pretty important. He predicted it. So why are we looking at the meter? Ding! Oh, I need to die. Okay, in the last increment I had closed, saying that 2 Samuel 23 was metered by a guy named Dr. Richard Gray back in 1749, which is where the word nuncios first appears in Matthew 25, standing for that year. And it's real important. Okay, real important. This is 2 Samuel 23. This is David's last song. This ends up being like a deathbed blessing, which is exactly what Christ is doing in Matthew 24:25. So it's kind of not surprising that he would prophesy a book that would metrically translate the last words of David, since he's this last David. Okay? This is the way Greek drama is written. They always take like obscure things to show that, hi, I really know what I'm saying when I'm predicting the future. I mean, nobody would think to look this up. When we think of prophecy, we think of major historical events, okay? We don't think of the real important history, like when a Bible book is metrically translated because the scholars are too arrogant to think about, oh, gee, maybe we want to count syllables since that's what the ancients all did. All right? So here, you can buy this at Amazon. The Last Words of David by Richard Gray, paperback. There's 6 of them available used from $16. There are 12 of them new from $11. I'm going to buy one, so I don't know if they'll be the same price when you get there. You've got other formats and editions. Let's see what those are. Only paperback. Since it's paperback, that means a lot of copies have been sold, okay? And apparently the paperback version came out in June 2010, so it means there's still a market for it. Oh, got that? Okay. And let's get rid of this. All right. I don't know how he metered it. I don't know if he's following the Hebrew or not. But it says the meter. Implication that he's following the Hebrew syllable counts. Well, how am I going to find out? Well, I'm going to have to buy it. See? Last Words of David divided according to the meter. Amazon.com. That's how I found it. By looking up the title that I just showed you over here. See? Last Words of David. See? Right here. 1749. Ding. Doesn't say that it's 1749, but it was. That's where the word nuncios ends. The word nuncios is in Matthew 25 at the end of, I want to say verse 3 or something. I can't call it up because in 64-bit Windows it won't let me, play with the other stuff. Okay? So here, you can look at it up yourself, and you know what? There must be a market for it, huh? Even now, because here it is for sale at Amazon. Gee, some people actually want to know the Hebrew syllable counts. So why don't the scholars pay attention to that, since they can make money on it? Ooh! I am so mad at the so-called scholars I could spit. I gotta go use 1 John 1:9. Leaving again. Oh, I forgot to mention something that's really important. David died when he was 77, and the stupid scholars used Josephus instead of the Bible, so they think he died at age 70. The Bible actually says he died at 77, but it says so in a clever manner. 1 Kings 6:1, if you go look it up, you don't have to use the Hebrew, you can even see it in English, is basically telling you that David would have been 80 years old when Solomon starts to build the temple. And how do you know that? Well, you had to actually read the previous 5 chapters, which carries you from the time that David retires at age 70, and then he spends the next 7 years doing the temple, which is in 1 Chronicles 22 through 29. That's what he did in his retirement. And in those same 7 years, Solomon started ruling, which everybody knows. So when it says the 4th year of Solomon in 1 Kings 6:1, it's talking about the 4th year of Solomon, meaning after David died. So David died 3 years prior. Okay, so that means David was 77. Get the point? 7 chapters. I mean, the chapter markers are in the Hebrew. They call them Samex markers, and sometimes they're Fe markers. Okay, so what? The scholars didn't figure that out? I figured that out. It wasn't too hard. 7 chapters, 7 years, 1 chapter per year. Because David, after he retires, starts to regret it and thinks, oh, my son Solomon's too young. And therefore they thought, well, maybe Solomon's not really anointed king. So they started to take somebody else in his place. And that's what 1 Kings 1-5 covers, up until the 3rd year after David dies. So that's why 1 Kings 6:1 says, in the 4th year of Solomon. It's not too hard to figure out if you just do a little reading. But no, the scholars wanted to look up Josephus, who said that David died when he was 70. Okay, that's not what the meter of 2 Samuel 23 tells you. 2 Samuel 23 tells you that David was 77 when he died. It's a date line. Hi, I'm 77 when I'm writing this thing. That's his first date line in the book, because that's what meter does, is it date lines. The first time his text sevens is at 77. The second time it sevens is at 91, which is exactly the same meter as is in Psalm 1 for the date line. Except it's the third date line in the Psalm 1-3. I didn't know that. This guy knew that. This guy here. Anoni nominon. See? See? This is his meter. You can go look this up. Right here. See? This is his own meter. He metered it just now. See? 91. And there are the meter benchmarks. And these first two are the date lines for Psalm 1. How come the scholars don't know that? But we do. Here's a third date line, 91. It's the same. The same. In 2 Samuel 23, verses 1-3. And 14 syllables prior to the 91 that closes David's life, just as Psalm 1 is the, David's the guy who's starting the book. That's not the first psalm he ever wrote, but it's where he starts the book. Is also 91. Okay? So here we are, sweetheart. 77, the first date line in 2 Samuel 23, verses 1-3. The first date line is his age. Hi, I'm David. I'm writing at age 77, which is the same way of phrasing it as he does here. See, 14 and 28 equals 42. David's writing when he's 42 years old, which I explain here. I'm 42 when I write. I was anointed by King Samuel 28 years prior when I was 14. I've been king for 12 years. 14 years from now, I will have 21 years left to live. And how do I know that he meant that before I looked up 2 Samuel 23? Because Isaiah 53 uses that as its first 77 syllables. And Matthew knew that, which is why he played on the 42. And Luke knew that, and he played on the 35. Now, I did the Isaiah videos back in 2008. You can see them in Vimeo. It's the Isaiah 53 channel. Could you ask for more confirmation than this? And here's a book. You read it yourself. See how he counts the syllables. He might not count it the same way. But you can look up the Hebrew of 2 Samuel 23, verses 1-3, and parse it yourself, because that's what Anominon just did right here. Okay? Do it yourself. This is 2016, honey. It's not hard to do. It's not hard to learn the Bible in Greek and Hebrew like it used to be, because we got software now. So you got some homework to do. See this for yourself. Because 91 is a season. Paul uses this meter of 91 for seasons. Christ does the same thing in Matthew 24 and 25. So go do your homework. Peace out.
Well, it turns out, now I've locked the taskbar so it stays on screen. I don't know if I'll be able to use it, but I'll try. It turns out just before or after I exited this, the last video, I found this. Look at this. It's on the same disc. The Book of Job. Look, essays and, what does it say? Metrical paraphrase. They call it a paraphrase because, in a way, you are. It's not a literal translation. If you're just copying the syllables, you might have to use different English words that are slightly different from the meaning in the Hebrew. And this is done by Rossiter Raymond, Ph.D. Metrical paraphrase. Now watch. This guy's a scholar. Hello. With an introductory note by a guy named Conan. Okay, from the American Bible Union. That's pretty scholarly, don't you think? Metrical paraphrase. And this isn't the Psalms anymore, honey. This is the Book of Job. And what year is this? Kill yourself right now. See? 1878. So let's have a look at what this guy intends to do. Oh, I hate these. They have too many blank pages in these things. Author's preface. That's important. Members of the adult Bible class of Plymouth Church, Brooklyn, New York, at whose request this book has been made published, will need no explanation as to its origin and nature. Brooklyn, you know what Brooklyn is. This is where a lot of Jews congregated and still are today. But it's the Bible class of Plymouth Church, the Plymouth Brethren, okay, dispensationalists. They made the Darby translation, or not necessarily these people, but their sister churches. Okay, Brooklyn, New York, and whose request this book has been published will need no explanation as to its origin and nature, but for the information of others into whose hands it may fall, some prefatory remarks. That's kind of an odd way of saying it. Some prefatory remarks seem to be required. Here we go. During the year 1877, the class referred to was engaged in, get this, the critical study of the Book of Job. This portion of Scripture was selected partly because it is one of those which has been most sadly abused both in translation and in exegesis, partly because its admitted character as a work of dramatic art takes it to a great extent out of the realm of theological controversy and opens it to unprejudiced critical examination. And finally, because the result of such an examination is to shed unexpected light upon the whole theory of revelation as a history of divinely guided religious culture. Here we go. The metrical paraphrase was prepared week by week as the class. This guy was teaching the meter in class in the study of the text. This is I hope you got this. This is a guy with a PhD teaching his own Bible class using meter for his students. Now, I hope you understand that in the 1800s, it wasn't, getting a book and reading was really revered, but it wasn't common. It was desirable. They didn't have public schools in those days. So you either learned it from your parents at home, or you paid a whole lot of money to go to school, or you hired a tutor. So this is really, really important that this guy is teaching a whole Bible class as a part of a church, not college. You got that? And he's teaching the meter, which means it was popular. You getting that? If you're teaching something in a Bible class with just your average layman in it, and you're using meter, to us today, that's pretty sophisticated concept since none of the scholars are talking about it. But here's this guy publishing a book that is essentially the repeat of the classes he was teaching in the study of the text of Job. Job. Not Psalms. Job, which is a prose book. It's got a lot of literary value, but it's a prose book. Okay? And that's some kind of identifying mark for this particular book. Okay, and was presented as a convenient, the meter is considered convenient means of conveying a version more accurate in its fidelity to the thought of the original than that of the King James translators. You see, this is what happened. In the 1800s, they found a whole bunch of Bible manuscripts, Tischendorf, Tregelles, a bunch of other guys, and they started comparing the King James translation to the original manuscripts they had of the Hebrew and the Greek. And they said, you know what, we need to retranslate. King James is fine, it's venerated, everybody's familiar with it, but it's not as fidelis, it's not as loyal to the thought of the original. This is the first thing they teach you in seminary about what they call textual criticism. You are trying to apprehend the thought of the original writer. And that was all the rage and all the fad and all the fashion, even in a Plymouth congregation in Brooklyn, which, by the way, would have much easier access to the Hebrew since a whole bunch of Jews living in Brooklyn then. Okay? As English poetry, it can lay claim to no other virtue than that of Saxon simplicity. In other words, it doesn't necessarily rhyme, but it is measured. Meter means measured. Those scholars who are acquainted with the translations and commentaries of Ewald, Haersol, Delitzsch. Delitzsch was kind of he's a weirdo, okay? And Conant will find no startling novelty in the departures of this paraphrase from the accepted version. In other words, it's got the same meaning, okay? But it's closer to the original because they're going to count the syllables. The original has been studied only through these and other authors, and no change has been adopted which is not justified with weighty arguments by one or more of them. Where equally good authorities disagree, the ground of choice among them has been furnished by the context. In other words, just the Bible, please. We're looking at the Bible, and when there's a dispute, the Bible is right and everybody else is wrong. That's exactly the kind of thing that Christ was predicting would happen. That's exactly the point of the timeline in Matthew 24 and 25. The Bible we all take for granted today has been fought over for centuries. And one of the things that we lost still is the meter. But they didn't lose it. This is 1878. 1640 now to 1878, no longer 1839. And it's in the book of Job, no longer just the Psalms. While the paraphrase is chiefly to be judged as an attempt to reproduce the thoughts and arguments of the original, it may possibly serve also to convey a juster conception of the poetry. Much of the current talk about the sublimity of Job is based on vague imprecisions formed without analysis. For instance, a famous passage in the 39th chapter strikes the meat of the war horse clothed with thunder, a phrase which is often quoted with admiration, but is merely, was it a monstrous, a sonorous mistranslation? The notion of noise is inseparable from the word thunder, while the notion of thunderous noise has nothing whatsoever to do with the name of the charger. In other words, you don't have a thunderous mane. There's no such thing as a thunderous mane. It doesn't make any noise, the mane of the horse. Okay? Clothed with thunder. A horse clothed with thunder. Well, what's the clothing? The mane of the horse. So what they're trying to do is take away the sonorous translation and have it make sense. Okay, now, then he goes into the shaking of the mane, which is the original, indicates a shaking that inspires awe in the beholder, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so now let's have a look at what his paraphrase is. The changes in translation are amply discussed and vindicated. That volume paraphrase chiefly based on its version referred to an explanation. German translations, not being revisions, but free original versions, give to many passages interpretations. So he's saying, look, we compared the original, we compared the German, and we compared the revised version in English. Okay? So he's basically defending the translation by saying, look, I did my homework with respect to the other hoary heads and what they had to say the words meant. Okay? I want to get to the actual translation. I don't want the introductory note. I just want to look at the text. Take me to the text. Book of Job. Okay, now you're telling me about the book of Job. I want to see the translation, please. This is the commentary part. Book of Job is a historical picture. Yes, I know that. Give me the text. Where's the translation? Ugh. You know, one thing that was bad about the 19th century is they would talk and talk and talk forever and never really say anything. They felt it was more majestic to multiply words. Excuse me. Oh, boy. There's no table of contents. That's another flaw that was often in 19th century literature. They didn't think that you'd care to have a table of contents. Okay, well, I'm going to find it. Okay, this looks like it's supposed to be the book of Job, but I got to stop here because I'm coughing too much. Okay, you see before you, on page 62 of this Essays and Metrical Paraphrase, on the left, the revised version as it was in 1878, done by Conant. That's what you see in the previous pages who did this. And on the right, this is the new author's, who's also a doctor. This is what he was teaching in class. And he's calling it a paraphrase because technically it differs from the so-called revised version. Alright? In other words, he's using the revised, not the authorized. And this is Job 3:3, where he starts to meter it. That's not how the Bible does it. The Bible starts the meter early. But maybe in some passages it starts after the first couple of verses. And the reason why I know that is because that's how Paul does it. Ephesians 1:3 through 14 is metered. Ephesians 1:1 and 1:2 are not metered. Now, Anomenon, who found the Matthew 24 meter text, disagrees with me. He thinks that Ephesians 1 and 2, verses 1 and 2, are also metered. And I haven't looked up his claim to validate, maybe he's more, he's got it right. It could be. All right, it really could be. But the point is that this content of evaluating the syllable counts in the meter is nothing new. But it's not being used to its full extent the way it ought to be. So here in 1878, a guy was teaching his own congregation, the Plymouth Church in Brooklyn, his paraphrase, what he's calling a paraphrase, because he's comparing it to the Revised Version, of Job 3:3 in this particular case, which I looked up in the Hebrew. Okay, so now let's look at the paraphrase. Count out the syllables. Perish my day of birth forlorn. That's 8 syllables. Perish my day of birth forlorn. 8 syllables. The night which said, a man-child born. Another 8 syllables. Okay, you got that? Perish my day of birth forlorn. The night which said, a man-child born. Let's count it all again. Perish my day of birth forlorn, the night, that's 10 syllables, which said, a man-child born. So 16 syllables. Now, the Hebrew I got is between 20 and 22 syllables, depending on whether you elide some of the consonants. Like, for example, today, the pronunciation of Hebrew is not the same as it was in the text of the Bible. In the Bible, Deuteronomy 6:4, for example, it says Shema Israel. Well, they don't say it that way today. They don't say Shema today. They say Shema. So they've condensed 2 syllables into 1 syllable. That's an elision. They're eliding the first syllable and just smushing it. Alright? And they don't say Yisrael anymore. They say Yisroel. There's been a tendency of Jews to pronounce A sounds as O sounds. Okay? Like it's Rosh Hashanah in the Hebrew. But they say Rosh Hashanah. And I grew up saying it like that too. Okay, but it's Rosh. The actual word for head, beginning, is Rosh. Alright? Not Rosh. But your average Jew today pronounces it Rosh Hashanah. Okay? Ha means the, Shana means year. Head of the year. Happy New Year. Okay? So the pronunciation difference is there. This guy is saying that if he's keying it to the Hebrew syllables, it's 16. Okay, here on the left, and this is what I found more interesting. Watch this. Perish the day wherein I was born. That's 9 syllables. You got that? And the night which said, a man-child is conceived. So that's 9 syllables and 11 syllables for verse 3. That's a total of 20. The Hebrew text can be read as 20 syllables up to 22. I come up with 21. There was 1 syllable that was easily elided. If you look in your modern Bible for Job 3:3, you will find out when you count the syllables that it will be somewhere between 22 and 20. It will not be 16. So what that tells you is that this guy's paraphrase for the first verse, he didn't care so much about the count of the syllables as he did about the poetic meaning in English. So he condensed it to 2 sets of 8. 8 is a very important number in Bible meter, but he doesn't seem to know that. Or maybe he does. But this one is more close to the actual Hebrew count. This is 20 syllables here on the left-hand side. Revised translation. And it's closer to your modern translations if you look in your typical English Bible for Job 3:3. You'll get somewhere between 20 and 22 syllables, which is how you could read the Hebrew, between 20 and 23 syllables. And like I said, I read it at 21. Now, if it's true that this is the first time that Job is lamenting and metering, because it's the first time he's being quoted, and it could very well be, because it's his words rather than the writer, giving a preamble. At 21 syllables, okay, at 21 syllables, Job is date-lining his first date. Okay, there are always 2 date lines in the meter, and they're both divisible by 7. The first one, and then there's a second one. And in this case, it'd be 21 years from X. Could be that he's playing a parallel between his own age when he was born again and the age of one of his sons, who he liked a whole bunch, who was 21 at the time he's talking. Okay? He could be making that play. It could be 21 years from something else. It could be 21 years to something else, but more likely from the past. I have no idea what that 21 really is. You'd have to read more of Job and abstract more of the meter to know. The biggest problem what we have with the book of Job is a lot of people think that it was written before Moses. And they have trouble dating, how old is the book of Job? So it's going to be real important to be able to evaluate that date line. And I don't know. Because I haven't started doing the meter on Job yet. The point I want you to see is that there is recognition even in your current translation of today, 2016. They are trying to count the Hebrew syllables like this was done in 1878 here, but not done in the paraphrase here. And he's coming up with 20 syllables, which I can see, how he got that. Your modern translations also are between 20 and 22 syllables for this verse. So somebody, even today, is aware that it's important to count the syllables. They just haven't figured out that, maybe you count the syllables all over the Bible, or at least in the first chapters, because they tell you when the book is written. And the theme, the count, will relate to the text. So that's why I'm saying, well, okay, this 21 might have to do with one of Job's sons who'd just been killed. All right? And now he's got the scabies or the boils on his skin. And now he's finally, screaming. And he's picking 21 and he's even metering what he says. So even though he's screaming, he's still thinking scripture. Now you start to understand why God praised him at the beginning of Job 1 and 2. All right? Now, I didn't abstract the Hebrew for this versus this for verse 4. Okay? I just want you to see that the principle applies, and you can go yourself and look at the Hebrew yourself and count the syllables yourself, and then look at your translation and see, are they trying to match the Hebrew syllable counts? And if the answer is yes, and it should be, if it's here, it ought to be continuous. If it's here, and they're matching the syllable counts here, what happened? Did the brains turn off? If even in modern translations they're trying to count the syllables in Job and in Psalms, why doesn't it dawn on them, maybe you want to count it in other books of the Bible too? And instead, what do? To this day, they keep saying, well, what kind of poetry style is in Scripture? Honey, it's not a question of poetry style. If you're counting the syllables and they end up having a number that's sevens, that should be significant to you. You should say, well, gee, if it's happening here in sevens, because we saw it in the Psalms, okay, and now we're seeing it in Job, and it's sevening. If it's sevening, then maybe that's a style pan Bible. Well, then start counting the syllables in Genesis, and you'll find out, oh, wow, Moses is doing the same thing. And it's not some kind of poetic style with strophes and all the other nonsense that you're expecting. Yeah, and what does that tell you then? That the counting of the syllables is how they preserved the text. So the words Moses wrote, the words Job says here, can be verified and copied over and over and over and over. And yes, we have the same words because, honey, when you're measuring by sevens, that shows intent. Peace out. Okay, here's another one that you can get from the old CD bookshop at gmail.com, or same name as on eBay without the Gmail appendage. This is also in verse. See, Revelation, they call it a paraphrase because it's not the authorized version. But they see, it says in verse. This one's done by Reverend T.P. Briggs. Okay, with an introduction by somebody with some initials after his name. Part of Brown University. That's reasonably respectable, right? And look at the year, 1892, and look what it's on, Revelation. Now, I have already done the meter in Revelation 1. That's been up in Vimeo for a while now. Okay? You can download it yourself as johndateline-meters.pdf and see the Greek yourself for this. Okay, I haven't abstracted all the meter in Revelation, but I did do the first chapter of each book of the New Testament, including Revelation, because I wanted to prove that, yes, they use 7ing meter in order to tell you when they wrote. And John is telling you pretty specifically when he wrote Revelation. In 88 AD, which, later history will later confirm, oh, that's the year that, yes, the mission really was persecuting Jews, not Christians, Jews. Even Jews in his own household. Okay? And John is what? A Jew. So John is what? On Patmos, but not necessarily because of the mission, but because it became fashionable to persecute Jews if the mission was doing it. You get that? Like with Donald Trump, it's become fashionable to be anti-Semitic because Donald Trump is encouraging the anti-Semites to vote for him. So now all kinds of Jews are getting death threats from the anti-Semites all over journalism land. Yeah, well, what do you think happened during the time of Domitian when he turned anti-Semitic? That's why John's in Patmos. It's not 96 AD, it's 88. And he dates his own text. So I wanted to see, oh, wow, I just found this in this other piece, which is a list of New Testaments. And you can just ask for it, Revelation Paraphrase PDF. The old CD bookshop will know which one it is, and they'll know what CD to give you. It's actually in the New Testament CD. Okay, I can't dislodge it now to tell you the actual title because I am using it to show you this on screen. But you'll see this in 1892, okay? So in 1892 it was still fashionable to count the actual words. This time we're looking at the Greek. To count the syllables. And guess what? That's what this boy is doing. He's not counting. I don't agree with his counts, but I can tell that's what he's doing. See? Oh, yeah. Get past this too verbose introduction. Here we go. Revelation chapter 1. Okay? The revelation of our Lord, which God the Father gave to him. 16 syllables. It is 16 syllables in the Greek. You could argue it was 15. But the point is, I can tell he's counting the Greek syllables. To show to all his watchful saints the things which shortly must be done. That's another 16. The Greek is not 16. The Greek is 15. For sure the Greek is 15. You cannot make the Greek be 16. But because this is 16, he wants this to be 16. He didn't have to translate it so it's 16. He could make it 15. I did. You just, instead of saying shortly, just say soon, because that's what take means. Suddenly without warning is really what it means, but that's too many words. So just soon. Okay, we use that same expression in English. Oh, it'll happen soon. Soon meaning when? It's vague, right? That's not really what take means in Greek. It means suddenly without warning, surprise attack. But you can't use all those words if you're trying to translate it as verse. But if he had used soon instead of shortly, then he would have equaled the Greek syllables. But he didn't want to do that because this is 16, so he wants this to be 16. Okay, I'd argue that he could make this be 15 and therefore this be 15. But he didn't choose to do it that way. But notice, I know what he did. I know what syllables he counted, and he was counting the Greek syllables. Are you getting the point here? What Brainerd has been saying, which nobody seems to know, was in fact commonly known. This guy's writing a book. You know, in those days, you wrote a book, you need to make money on it, and how many people are going to want to buy that book? Well, there has to be a market for it, doesn't there? Or the publisher isn't going to want to publish it. See, this was published, copyright 1892 by James Earl. Okay? And the publisher is James Earl. Well, he ain't going to stay in business very long if he doesn't have a market for his product. So what does that tell you? People wanted to see this. They wanted you to count the syllables in the Greek this time. And this is Revelation, which is a prophecy. It is not a poem. Okay? It's not a poem. And they have to call it a paraphrase because it's not the original authorized version in English, so they have to call it a paraphrase. But it's not really a paraphrase, it's a pretty literal translation, because look, honey, I dare you not to notice. You go look at the Greek if you know how to read it. That's pretty good. Pretty good literal translation. Shortly is not what I would use as the right word, for reasons given. But this is pretty literal, okay? It's not in quite the same order as the Greek words, but it's got the same syllable counts. That's about as much as you can hope for. So here, honey, see, it's not just brain out now. This was a popular thing to do, or this guy couldn't sell his book in 1892. So what happened to the scholars in the 20th century? I think I've made my point clear. They do know this meter exists. They don't know very much about it, but they knew enough that, ooh, we should count the same syllables the way they did in the original Bible. Yeah. And they even wrote books that they published about it. So what I'm telling you is a recovery of lost information that is not like out there in the Tulis. Okay? Here's your proof. I've been giving you proof. You want more proof? If I find it and it's useful, I'll give it. Okay, I'm making another video to demonstrate that this business of people knowing there was meter of sevens in the Bible pre-existed my talking about it, because no one in modern times seems to know about it. This book in front of you, God thinks of everything, boy oh boy. This book in front of you, you can actually purchase. It's in the public domain, but I have no idea where you find it on the internet, and I can't access the internet right now because my internet is down. And it's because my internet is down that I found this book of stuff I purchased. I purchased a bunch of CDs of Bible stuff from eBay. And you can do the same thing. The address is theoldcdbookshop@gmail.com. Just run all that together. All lowercase. Theoldcdbookshop@gmail.com. I'm not going to put that in the video description because then they'll get inundated with, junk mail. Alright? Theoldcdbookshop@gmail.com. What you want to ask to order is called 250 Rare Bibles. It's 2-disc set. This, what you see on the screen, is the first disc. Hopefully this is not an important call. Okay, I gotta hang up. Sorry for that interruption. That was Comcast telling me my service was restored when it wasn't restored, and if I was still having problems, I should dial 1 while waiting on the phone. And I dialed 1, and then they said, well, I'm sorry, the service is not available. Guess what? So now we're back here. 1839 is when this particular book is printed. And you can get it yourself. The title for the CD is 250 Rare Bibles. This is on disc 1.
and it's called New Version of the Psalms of David, as you can see up here in the upper left-hand corner. New Version of the Psalms of David. And you can see that it's an actual copy of a book somebody actually owned, okay? Fitted to the tunes to be used in churches. Oh, stupid. Adobe never figures out that dark blue doesn't work on black. Okay? To the tunes to be used in churches. And this isn't by the Bay Psalm book. This is a new translation by Ann Tate and N. Brady. And as you can see here, it's 1839. Down at the bottom, the MDCCCXXXIX. And to confirm that, yes, that's the right number, here you see 1839 in the lower right-hand corner. Now, what's really interesting about this is when you come up here, a new version of the Psalms of David. This is Psalm 1. Now, count the syllables in English, because we already talked about this before in the 1640 book. Look. How blessed is he who ne'er consents by ill advice to walk. That's 14 syllables, exactly like the 1640 counted the Hebrew. So it's looking at the same Hebrew text in 1839 that the writers were looking at in 1640, and I'm looking at the same text both of them are looking at. So, honey, we got the same Hebrew text. You got that? Second clause, nor stands in sinners' ways, nor sits where men profanely talk. That's another 14 syllables. Now, this is a better translation than what I showed you before. Okay? For English, it's a better translation. It makes a little free with the Hebrew words, but it has the same root meaning, and they chose to make it rhyme, because in 1800s, rhyming was important. I swear I was raised to rhyme. I could talk all day rhyming if I wanted to. Then I would bore everybody to death. Just look at that for a minute. Now, if you remember the last video, I showed you Psalm 1 online, which I can't do now. See, because I have no internet access, so I can't show you that I have no internet access. Because this thing, when it records in 64 bits, it won't let me show the control panel. Okay, but it's 28 syllables in verse 1, according to the 1640 Bay Psalm book that some guy named David, also named David, paid $14 million for in 2013, which you can see in the wiki entry. And it's now currently on loan to the Library of Congress. This book in front of your face now is 2 centuries later, 1839. A new translation, but still counting by the Hebrew syllables to make the English ones. You got that? What does that tell you? Think about it. The first book printed in 1640 in the United States is of the Psalms 20 years after Roanoke. So Roanoke was by no means alone for, in all by itself, mysteriously disappearing in 1620. Printing press is not the first thing you build when you create a town. You have to create your housing first. You have to find water. You have to find a way to cook. It takes several weeks at least just to build one house. Because you got to cut the wood, you got to strip the wood, you got to maybe polish the wood, you got to maybe treat it with pitch so it'll be able to keep out the rain. And the first book they want printed is the Psalms. What does that tell you about Bible interest in 1640? Okay, and what you're looking at on screen is 1839. 2 centuries later, almost to the day, to the year. And they're still using the same style
to translate the Psalms, counting the Hebrew syllables. So for 200 frickin' years, the idea of counting the syllables to translate, to count the syllables in the Hebrew was known. Okay? Was known. Here we go. You're looking at it. First we saw 1640. Now in front of your screen, that same Psalm 1 verse 1 has got the same syllable count as the one in 1640. So people were paying attention to the syllable counts, and they were paying attention to what went before in the English translations of them. You got that? So what happened to the scholarship? How come a brainout thinks, oh, well, gee, you know, Isaiah 53 is metered. Well, they knew the Psalms of David were metered. Why didn't they think the same thing of Isaiah 53? And why didn't they think the same thing of Genesis 1? Because it's metered too. Every first chapter of every Bible book I've looked at so far is metered. Now, maybe the other ones are too. But I'm 63 years old. I'm not going to live forever to be able to do all this. But somebody else has done it. You're looking at it. Now, what is this telling you? It's really bloody important. This is like the most important Christmas gift you can probably get this year. Yes, we have the original words of God. How come we know that? Because the same Hebrew text in 1640 that they used to translate in English that you've already seen is the same text that they're using here in 1839. They're just translating the English differently. And you see why. It's a clearer, simpler, more catchy translation, easier to remember. That was why the original text in the Bible was metered in the first place, to make it easy to remember. So what happened to the scholars? Don't tell me that none of them ever knew what I'm telling you for the past 8 years. I don't believe it. So what happened? They're no longer popular? Or the scholars aren't interested in this anymore? How can you not be interested in what proves we have the original words of God? So much so that people are counting the syllables in those words to create their translations, which is what we all ought to do. How come that's not being done? It was being done from 1640 to 1839. You got the proof of it right on your screen. Now, have I abstracted and counted the Hebrew syllables and the other verses and all this? No, not yet, but I'm going to have to now. I've been looking for this proof for 14 years. How can a brainout discover the meter and it was never known before? Who am I? Well, I'm just a brainout. And a whole bunch of other brainouts knew to do the same thing from 1640 to 1839. But the scholars didn't care. What other conclusion can you draw? Okay? So, again, how do you get this? Because I don't want to put it in the video description. Again, you can order this yourself. The name of the CD to order is called 250. Put that in numbers, 250. 250 Rare Bibles. And you order it from the old CD bookshop at gmail.com. This stuff is all public domain. Okay? This is 1839. It's public domain. If you can find it online and download it from online, well, do that. But this particular CD, let's see if I can show you that. I can't show you that. Okay. This particular CD is got a lot of Bibles on it, but now the thing has locked up, so I'm going to have to end this video. Again, the old CD bookshop at gmail.com is where you can see this for yourself and count the Hebrew syllables for yourself. Okay? Peace out. Hi, here's what's on the disc that I was talking to you about that you can order from the old CD bookshop at gmail.com. Okay, this is the contents of the first disc. It's in 2 discs, but right now I have loaded just the one, and highlighted is what I was just showing you on screen, the new version of the Psalms of David. Whoever found it online, so I'm sure you can find it online because it's in the public domain. But you'll notice that there's a whole lot of stuff on this CD. And for some reason the machine locks up and I can't scroll and show you all the things on CD. There's some problem in 64-bit Windows recording. I can't do it. So I just look up here, see where the running horse is. That means it's busy and I'm stuck and I can't do anything. American Standard Version, that's in WordPad. Here's the Darby Bible. There's another one I've never seen before called the Fenton Bible. Then there's the Ginsburg Bible, Hebrew Bible from 1894. I've got that in BibleWorks. And then there's some kind of critical and exegetical commentary on Genesis. I don't know how good that is. I haven't read it yet. New translation of the Psalms. Okay, well that and that. These are new translations of the Psalms. So somebody's doing something there with that, retranslating it. Here's another translation of the Psalms in 1789. And the thing is, what I'm trying to show you is that they knew to count the Hebrew syllables. All right? They knew to do that. And they've been redoing it each time since 1640. What I'm trying to tell you is this is the impact of America on history that Christ is tracing. Because the Bible got freed up when it left the continent, even from England. Okay, because England still insisted on a unity between church and state. In America, we broke that. And the Bible broke free as a result. Now, I'm not trying to say anything bad about Britain. If anything, Christ is centering everything on the English Reformation. But freeing up the Bible is the theme of what he's writing about in Matthew 24 and 25. And that's how we know how to interpret all those sevenings I was telling you about. So when I get to 2016 and you see it say, Lord, Lord, open to us in Matthew 25:11, there's a reason why I'm interpreting it that way. And I'm going through the text to show you how what you interpret and why you interpret it that way has a basis that goes back for centuries. I got to end this now because the busy signal isn't ending on my computer. Sorry.